Kia ora, my name is J.D. Evans. Let's read a book. This is Fatecarver by Robinne Weiss. Fatecarver is a YA fantasy and the first book in Robin's Fatecarver series. Robinne Weiss is an independent author from Aotearoa, and I want to start by saying a big thanks to them for letting me read a chapter of Fatecarver on YouTube. I have not read Fatecarver, so today's video will be my first time with the story, as well as I imagine many of yours. I like the idea of this format as it opens up more room at the end for first thoughts from me just focusing on the first chapter. Let me know what you think of this format in the comments below. Let's get into it then. Kalish had a plan. The gods had a different one. Kalish expects to become her clan's next Fatecarver, channeling the wisdom of the gods into the story scars of young women, tattooing their futures onto their skin. But the gods have different plans for her. Kalish's own story scar brands her a traitor. Banished by her clan, she sets out to find a new home, hoping to rewrite her own fate. But her story scar is more complex than even the elders guessed, and her travels take her far beyond the understanding of her clan. When she discovers a plot to destroy her own people, she must decide, leave them to die, or save them by becoming the traitor they think she is. It's pretty cool map work. Chapter 1. Drums sounded in the pre-dawn darkness. Dum-da-da-da-dum, dum-da-da-da-dum. Kalish bolted upright, tossing the blanket off and snatching up her staff. Raid! She shook Deo, still snoring next to her, as the others in the sleeping quarters stirred on their platforms. Within seconds, the gaggle of teens was alert and pattering quickly to their defensive stations. Men did the raiding, but everyone, down to the toddlers, defended the terrace, and they all knew what to do. Kalish was one of the first on the street, and she pounded along the dusty grit past the upper terrace's bread oven, already lit but now unattended. She squeezed through the narrow space between oven rock and the younger children's sleeping room. Up, she yelled on her way past. Raid! The forms inside began to stir, and Kalish ran on, taking the ladder down to the main terrace in great leaps. Deo caught up with her as she leapt down to the shelf at the edge of the cliff, where the raiders would try to ascend. Others were dropping onto the shelf with them, the space filling with fighters. Deo yawned and rubbed his face. How do you do it? Do what? Kalish dropped to her knees and shuffled to the edge of the cliff to peek into the darkness below. Go from asleep to awake faster than a lanthand can strike. Kalish slithered back from the edge and smiled at Deo. Maybe I'm half snake. Something for you to aspire to, little puffer. Little puffer was what the elders called Deo. From them, it was a scathing comment on his size and bravado. Puffers were small lizards that inflated their necks to look bigger when frightened. Kalish had taken to using the name as a way to mock the elders, and Deo didn't seem to mind when she used it. A dart whizzed between them and clattered against the stone. They flattened themselves to the ground. Caverna clan, Deo commented, glancing at the dart. Again. Those new dart launchers they have are annoying. Kalish inched forward, ignoring the gravel scraping her knees and elbows. Others around them did the same, staves and rocks in hand, waiting for the enemy to begin scaling the cliff. More darts pinged off the rock. Younger children scrambled to collect them. They're going to have to get better at aiming. All they're doing is delivering us darts to sling back at them. The creak and whoosh of a catapult further along the shelf told her the raiders' siege engine had been spotted. Then a shout rang out. The raiders were scaling the cliff. Let's hope their aim stays bad. Deo shoved himself forward until his upper body was hanging over the edge. Kalish followed, peering down into the gloom. She made out at least a dozen dark forms scaling the cliff. Fewer than the last raid, but there would be. Not all the raiders had survived the last attack. Their teeth, braided into the hair of Flint Crag warriors, were evidence of that. One of their attackers was already within range of her staff, and Kalish swung, giving a little flick with her wrist so the hooked end would sweep away from the cliff with speed. It was a perfect swing, and she smiled in satisfaction, but at the last moment the raider reached out and grabbed the staff. The man's weight jerked Kalish forward, gravel scraping her stomach and skittering down the cliff as she was dragged over the edge. A weight slammed onto her legs. "Let go of your staff!" Deo pinned her to the shelf. Kalish let go, her staff and the climber both ricocheting off the rocks as they fell. Deo dragged her back up, the broken cliff edge gouging new furrows in her stomach. She rolled away from the edge. "I hope my staff isn't broken." She ignored her stinging skin and scrambled to a pile of rocks ready for hurling. Crawling back to the edge with an armful of rocks, she heard the creak of an enemy catapult. A moment later, a boulder smashed against the upper lip of the cave the terrace nestled in. The defenders scurried back to avoid the falling rocks. "They'll have knocked some of their own off," Deo commented. "Aim. It's Caverna's weakness." Kalish inched forward again to drop a rock on another climber. It hit the side of the cliff and bounced, missing the raider. "Spines!" Deo chuckled beside her, dropping his own rock, which hit the mark and sent the man tumbling. "Aim? Maybe you should work on that." Kalish punched his arm, but laughed. Their laughter was cut off by shouts behind them. Raiders! On the main terrace! How had they gotten there? Cursing the loss of her staff, Kalish picked up another rock and stood, turning toward the commotion. Before she could throw, a dart sliced into her upper arm. She cried out and dropped her rock. "Get down, you idiot!" Deo scrambled toward her as she sank to her knees, gritting her teeth against the searing pain in her arm. Reaching her side, Deo held her arm firmly as he examined it. They really need to work on their aim. Still, this is going to hurt. And it did. There wasn't time to take herself somewhere else, and the full brunt of Deo extracting the dart made her eyes water. "I thought that you said they needed to work on their aim," she gasped. "They do. They almost missed you. That dart just slipped in under your skin." An explosion rocked the upper terrace, and Kalish flinched. "Great, they've brought incendiaries. Well, at least their aim is bad." "Not bad enough." Kalish lifted her arm and grimaced at the ragged tear in her skin. Blood flowed freely from it and dripped off her elbow. Another creak whoosh from a catapult on the shelf was followed by a chair. They'd hit the raiders' catapult. The fighting on the main terrace subsided, and before Kalish had a chance to worry about dodging darts on her way to the healers, their patter on the rocks ceased. The remaining raiders melted silently into the scrub, even before the sky was fully lit. "You're late." Kalish's mother, Narili, didn't turn as Kalish entered the fate chamber. "I was injured in the raid. I was at the healers." Narili turned and skewered Kalish with a glare. "There is no excuse for being late. A Fatecarver's sacred duties come before all others. Did you not tell them you must be seen first?" Onadi was badly hurt, struck in the stomach by a dart. The healers had to tend to him immediately. Narili scoffed. "Onadi is nothing but a farmer. You must assert yourself, Kalish. How will anyone respect you if you don't demand it?" Kalish frowned at her feet. "Yes, Fatecarver Narili. Don't use that tone with me, girl." Had she been that obvious? "I expect better of you, especially now, so close to your own fate carving. Your lessons are essential. Do you want to be incapable of producing proper fate carving because you slacked off? How would the women of the clan feel in future if they cannot rely on the wisdom of the fates to guide them, because you couldn't be bothered to learn how to communicate with them? You will not be late again for any reason. Next time you are injured, you will insist upon being seen first, or you will come to me still bleeding." Kalish forced her voice into a tone her mother might accept. "Yes, Fatecarver Narili. Look at me when you speak to me." Kalish wiped her face clean of emotion and looked into the eyes she'd never been able to meet without feeling failure. "I am sorry I was late. It won't happen again. What is today's lesson?" As she expected, the lesson had little to do with communicating with the fates. For the 5th day in a row, Narili set her the mind-numbing task of grinding pigment for the fate carvings her mother performed. She suspected the task was punishment. "But I know how to grind pigment," she argued. When will you teach me how to actually do the carvings? Why can't I sit in on today's and learn? The actual tattooing fascinated and terrified Kalish. The process was a mystery. She hadn't yet gotten her own fate carving. She knew how to prepare the thorns, mallets, and ink, and she had an idea of how the carving was done, but she'd never seen her mother at work. The process was a secret known only to the fate carvers themselves and the adult women of the clan whose faces bore the intricate stories of their future. "Do not question me," her mother barked back. "I am your mother and your fate carver. I decide what you learn and when. You are not yet a woman. Until your own face is carved, I cannot reveal the utmost secrets of the fate carvers." Maybe once Kalish had her story scar, things would be different. As an adult, maybe she'd be good enough for her mother. The day couldn't come soon enough. She sighed and set to work. At least pigment grinding left her mind free. While her hands worked with mortar and pestle, her brain grappled with her latest ideas for a folding glider wing. The trouble was in fashioning a hinge robust enough to take the force of the wind on the wings. Even ironwood tended to split under the strain. Anything strong enough to take the force was heavy and required a larger wing to compensate. With glider design to occupy her mind, the hours of grinding passed in a blur. "Your work is still sloppy," declared her mother as she peered into one of the clay jars of ground pigment. "Did you recite the entire blessing?" No, but she had worked out a new wing hinge design. "Yes, Fatecarver Narelli." Her mother pressed her lips together, and the weight in Kalish's stomach grew heavier. She would never live up to her mother's standards. How would she ever manage to be her clan's Fatecarver? "You will gather piramanga this afternoon," she ordered, handing a small sack to Kalish. See that you bring it back full." Kalish suppressed a groan, but at least it would take her outdoors and away from these fate-pocked pigments. Kalish grumbled as she stalked through the dry brush. This errand was senseless, a waste of her time. Mother didn't need the sacred piramanga leaves she'd sent Kalish out for. There were dozens of them stuffed into a jar in the fate chamber already. Sending her to gather the leaves was simply a way to keep her away from today's fate carving ceremony, a way to punish Kalish for being particularly argumentative this morning. But how could she be anything but irritated when her mother gave her nothing but menial tasks, day after day? She was practically a woman now, just a few 5 days from her own fate carving ceremony, and ready to start learning the skills needed to become a fate carver herself. Yet Mother wouldn't even let her watch a fate carving. She ignored the pain in her injured arm, hurled herself at a cliff, and began to climb. Her frustration and anger made her careless. She forgot to check each handhold, each ledge. When the snake struck, she swore and snatched her hand away. Her other hand slipped, her feet followed, knees and elbows bouncing off and scraping the rock as she fell. Spines! At the bottom of the cliff she clutched her knees, squeezing her eyes tight against the pain. But it wasn't her torn and bloodied limbs that upset her. She'd nearly been bitten by a lantan, and in her anger at her mother she'd left the terrace without the herb pouch she always carried, the pouch containing the lantan venom antidote. If she'd been bitten, she would never have made it home. Her anger would get her killed. She took a deep breath and slowly let it out. She was still angry, but forced herself to think calmly as she inspected her fresh injuries. How could she get what she wanted in spite of her mother? Blood dripped from her knees, and her scraped elbows stung, but they were nothing to worry about. She squinted at the sky. The sun had just broken over the top of the cliff. Mother would be in the Fate Walker realm preparing for today's carving. If Kalish entered the Fate Walker realm herself, might she be able to watch her mother at work? It wouldn't be the same as being there in person, but she'd at least learn something, and the idea of sneaking around against her mother's will made her smile. She scrambled underneath a bush so her body would be hidden and protected while she was away from it. Then, ignoring the task she was supposed to be doing, she slipped out of her skin and into the Fate Walker realm. Leaving her stinging knees and elbows behind, Kalish trotted back to the terrace. Narelli must meet the Fates in the Fate Chamber. There was no way Kalish could enter without being seen, but she might be able to eavesdrop from outside. She crept up the cliff to the terrace, stopping on the ledge below the main terrace where the fate chamber was located. She listened for any indication of her mother's whereabouts. Silence met her ears. Perhaps Mother was already in the fate chamber. A few more moments of silence emboldened her. She crept up the ladder to the main terrace. Seeing no one, she tiptoed toward the fate chamber and pressed herself against the wall beside one of the doors. The smooth adobe bricks were warm from the sun, and she let them calm her nerves as she listened. Surely you can't expect me to carve that on the girl's face. Kalish had never heard horror in her mother's voice before, but there was no mistaking it now. You must. It is her fate. Whichever fate Mother spoke had a low musical voice, soothing. How could her mother argue with such a voice? The elders will banish her if I do what you ask. I will not do it. Kalish stifled a gasp. Her mother was refusing to do what the fates decreed? You will. The voice took on an edge. You must. It is her fate, and even a Fatecarver cannot change that. But enough! You know your duty. You are bound by it. Footsteps sounded inside the chamber. Kalish scrambled down from the terrace and raced back to her body. Back in the real world, with aching knees and elbows, Kalish stood. Her anger with her mother had been replaced with confusion. She'd always assumed the fates spoke and Fatecarvers listened. Did her mother always argue? What did that mean for the story scars she carved? Did they represent the will of the fates, or her mother's will? And what sort of carving would get a girl kicked out of the clan? Kalish was glad she didn't know the girl her mother would carve today. Someone from one of the smaller terraces. She'd hate to see a friend banished. Slowly this time, watching where she placed her hands, Kalish resumed her climb. Hours later, having scoured the windswept butt for Pyramanga, Kalish stood at the edge of the cliff and shaded her eyes against the sun as she watched a falcon soar overhead. It hovered for a moment and then dove, folding its wings and plunging toward the tussocks below. After one of the rock skippers feeding on the nodding seed heads of the grasses, no doubt. Moments before it would have struck the ground, the falcon pulled out of its dive. A handful of rock skippers flushed from the grass and flitted away, but one wasn't fast enough. The falcon hit at its speed. A puff of feathers marked the impact and slowly drifted to the ground as the falcon rose again, bird clutched in its talons. Kalish sighed. If only she could fly like the Kiriki falcon. Gliders were a poor imitation of the power and precision of the falcon's flight. What would it feel like to be able to fly for real, with wings of her own? She spread her arms wide and imagined the breeze ruffling wing feathers. If she could fly, she wouldn't mind so much being sent on stupid errands. Movement on the valley floor caught her eye. The farmers returning from their daily work in the fields. Spines! She had been away far longer than she thought. She glanced at the half-empty bag of Pyramanga leaves lying by her feet. Her mother would know she'd been wasting time. Gathering Pyramanga was slow and boring work. Before each leaf was plucked off its wiry bush, she had to say a long prayer to the fates to ensure the potency of the leaf. It was forbidden to pick more than one leaf from each bush, and Pyramanga was sparse, so filling even a small bag could take hours. But Kalish had been gone all afternoon, and her bag was only half full. Her stomach sank at the prospect of her mother's reaction. She'd already been yelled at enough today. Another reprimand might just push her over the edge. She'd lose control of her tongue and snap back, and then there would be a screaming match. Those always ended badly for Kalish. A month of latrine duty or hide tanning on top of the endless menial tasks her mother set her to in the fate chamber. Whatever tasks she was assigned would keep her in the terrace all day, without any chance to climb to the top of the butte and watch the falcons or hunt goats in the crags further up the valley. She wouldn't be able to sneak away with Deo to test their latest glider design, or catch bats in order to study their wing structure. Kalish scrambled down the cliff and jogged through the scrub at its base. She reached a Pyramanga bush and paused. It was a scraggly little thing, with barely a dozen leaves on it. Her mother would have instructed her to leave it alone. The men were nearing the cliff now. Their laughter filtered through the scrub as they followed the path to the terrace. if they arrived home before she did. Without uttering a word of prayer, Kalish snatched 4 leaves off the plant. Sorry, she muttered as she hurried to find another. And that was chapter 1 of Fatecarver by Robinne Weiss. So, wow, my thoughts. Great hook right at the start. It's always very cool when a book starts straight off into the action, just launching straight into a fight scene. Um, Keeps the pace up, keeps it interesting. It's a real page turner right there. And also, fight scenes are super information dense, right? You can pack a whole lot of stuff into a fight scene and it doesn't feel exposition-y. It feels natural because there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different elements in the fight going on all at once. So you can introduce the world, you can introduce hazards in the world, talk about the environment, the history of the people, people's traditions, society, as well as talking about the bad guys and the good guys, for lack of a better word, all at once, and introduce a multitude of characters all interacting with each other in a tight format. So fight scenes right at the start are great for that, great for scene setting, and I really like the way that was done in this book. Um, yeah, multiple characters going straight at each other early on, and we got a real feel for not just the main character, but her mother and Dio, and even talking about the elders, we get a sense that there's a sort of mysterious, distant elder group that are in control of everything, and that they might be split into 2 groups: the Fatecarvers and the village elders, who are able to decide who gets to stay in the village. And then after the fight, switching gears to go a bit lower stress, but keeping the pressure on with that family tension was a great choice, I thought, because that kept the pace going, kept the pages turning while we were introducing the magic system in a really subtle way as well. Obviously, the perspective of the main character, it's super tempting sometimes. Certainly, I know the feeling. It's tempting to have the main character basically just explain the magic and just say what the magic is and how it all works. But this is done really subtly, really smoothly. They just talking about it exactly how the main character would, in a world where it was normal to step out of your body and walk in a different world. Um, and of course, then we got to introduce a problem. The first chapter was basically everything you needed to set the book up. It seems like everything's coming to a head really quickly, and that's probably going to be what spurs the journey for the main character. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. That was my first time reading Fatecarver, and I really enjoyed it. Uh, I'm going to finish it. I haven't read it yet, and I'm going to finish it pretty much straight away. As soon as we're done here, I think I'm going to go straight to the couch and find out exactly what happens to Kalish in the Fatecovers. But yeah, a reminder once again that Robinne Weiss is an independent author, so get out there and support them, guys. There will be links in the description to their website and social media and the various places you can pick up their books. I highly recommend picking up a copy of Fatecarver, and I have no doubt the rest of Robin's work, of which there is a lot, will be just as excellent. And as always, thanks very much for watching and listening, everyone. If you like this video, please consider leaving a like. If you want to see more like this video, please subscribe, ring the bell, and if you have any suggestions for books I might read in the future, please comment below. Thank you so much once again, and I'll see you next time.